So I wanted to continue talking about knives a little bit. And one of the issues I wanted to talk about is this idea that is sometimes brought up that medieval knives particularly were primarily pointy and designed mainly to stab, and definitely better for getting through armour, but not so good for the cut. Now, first of all, I have a couple of issues with this. I've handled an awful lot of knives. I've got a very good museum up the road, the Museum of London, that's got a very good collection of river-find knives. And you find all sorts in there. You find blades with offset edges, so if you imagine a box like so, the edges are offline like so. You find knives which look very, very much like Bowie knives. You get knives that look very, very much like stiletto type knives. You get an awful lot of variety. And people are obviously making the same tactical choices as they do now with knives. Would I prefer it to cut? Would I prefer it to thrust? Would I like it to be a combination of both? Would I like it to have an armour-piercing tip on it, perhaps? And there is indeed one of them, looks like a kitchen knife, has an armour-piercing tip on it. Now, the next problem I have with this is that you do not get to choose the knife your opponent has. So really, you cannot go into a fighting situation, even the hypothetical fighting situation, going, I know what kind of knife he's going to pull, therefore I'm going to fight with him in this manner. What we have to do is we have to fight against what the person gives us. So fundamentally, if we're dealing with someone with a knife, we have either a situation whereby they haven't pulled the knife, but we have awareness that they have a knife in a situation where they shouldn't and that it's a threat, so we have to deal with that through whatever means necessary and available to us. Secondly, that they're presenting the knife to us in a threatening manner. Now, that gives you something to work with, and I would suggest very much that you have a look at things like Mark Davis' Tactical Edge. Very, very good work on that. Now, in the circumstances that we're primarily dealing with ourselves, we're dealing with a situation where somebody has a knife and you're aware of it, and you have time and you have distance, and this is not necessarily the case, and it's very important to understand this, but on assuming that we have this time and this space and that we're fortunate enough to have this brief moment in which to react, and the other situations already taken care of, hopefully by the discussion, we then still don't get to dictate the kind of knife that our opponent has and how they're going to use it. We are only able to deal with those things. Obviously, I'm talking about knife fighting in the context of the manuals that we're using, but I believe that we can also deal with these things in a very, very common sense way. So if our opponent hasn't drawn the weapon, but the situation has deteriorated and we know that the knife is there and there's a threat, then obviously we want to deal with them before the knife is drawn and prevent the knife from being drawn. If they've drawn the knife and we don't have time to stop them from doing so, then obviously we have to shut them down as quickly as possible while still dealing with the knife as quickly as possible. However, the circumstance we're talking about is where we both have the knives and we're both ready. One of the things that's been brought up is that somebody in particular felt that this was a much safer way of using a knife, because here, if you use this, it's a very, very limited position. You've got good, powerful downward strikes, but you've got, not too much else you can do. Firstly, again, as Matt's pointed out, there's a degree of movement here. There's even a greater degree of movement. And what I'd like to talk about to an extent is what happens when you're using your left hand to control your opponent towards your right side. Now, this being the case, if I take the knife like so, and I'm controlling my opponent, pushing them as far from me as possible to keep them away from this side, if I come in this side here, this action of the knife is very, very strong. It drives towards the centre of my body, and it shows you that, in fact, that by repositioning your body structure, you can use this point towards the elbow from a multitude of different positions. The same as you would effectively if you're banging nails into a wall this way here, bam, 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 drop your body into position in order to use it in that manner. So I feel that people that are saying that there's a lot more variety that you can use here are again missing the point slightly. To finish up with, I want to talk about cuts to the weapon hand and also thrusts to the weapon hand in whichever way you're using. So attacks to the weapon bearing limb, basically. Now, these are illustrated, possibly not as much as you might expect. Personally, my understanding of this is that, well, it's fucking obvious. If somebody gives you the space to do so and presents the limb, destroy it. Then you don't have to deal with the knife. But the amount of technique involved in this is really simple. So does it really need covering? And I think to a large extent, this again can be covered by the tactical awareness of the situation, that if you can prevent it before it's going to kick off, then do so. Do we need to cover that in the manual? Probably not. Damaging the knife hand. If you get the opportunity to do so, of course, it'll stop him from being able to stab you. However, if in the case of a slightly frenzied or desperate assault where it's happening very, very sudden, the closure is very, very sudden, what I want you to have a look at is your joint destruction going to stop that attack from hitting you? And that's the only time that it's valid, is if it will stop it from reaching you. So against a more tentative attack, quite possibly a very, very good thing. But you have to guarantee that when that guy or person is attacking you, that your cut, your thrust is going to prevent that attack from reaching you. Because we're not talking about the couple of minutes afterwards when they notice that their thumbs are hanging off. We're talking about that moment between it going from them getting hit and going into you.